I'd like to talk about capacity, people's capacity. And it's very helpful to understand what someone's capacity is, be it romantic, familial, or otherwise, because it gives us a context to work within. And then that leads on to the second part that I'd like to talk about is how to not take things personal. And when we stop taking things personal, we can also let go of the story that we wrap around all of our relationships, past, present, and future. So that's what we're going to look at today. This is Corinne Bloom, and you're listening to Raw Conversations. What do I mean by capacity? I'm going to try and describe this as best as I can. Capacity is just where someone's at and what is their ability to be able to meet your needs or to meet a certain level of maturity or to have a certain skill to be able to communicate well. It's really just what is within someone's ability is the best way. And I don't say that with any kind of judgment. The reason why kind of over the years I've really understood the importance of recognizing someone's capacity is not to patronize them. It's to really, like I said, give context to where that person is at within their own personal development. Because if someone can't move beyond their capacity in that moment, and you're pushing to try and get a need met by them, which they simply do not have the capacity to meet, you're going to be just forever eternally frustrated. And if you're in a partnership, but this is also like to do with your family, friends, the world at large, you can literally put this into any context. You know, if you're in especially a dynamic that is present on a daily, if not weekly basis, so either your romantic partner or a really dear friend or your family, if you don't understand the context of capacity, you're just going to be bumping heads all the time, or you're going to go around in circles within the same kind of argument, or you're going to get triggered in the same kind of way over and over again. And as we know, triggers just perpetuate our story even more. So today, understanding the capacity so that we don't have to take things personal, so that we can let go of our story, is what liberates us. Now, part of that is understanding that there will be an aspect of us that wants to I want my need to be met, or I want to be understood in this way, or, I want what I want kind of thing, And the thing is, it's a humble path to be human, and it's a humble path to be in relationship of all forms. And part of that is just sometimes we just have to let go. And the ultimate, where this all brings us to, is that we kind of have to, I like this word, it makes me laugh every time, adulting. We've got to adult. At the end, we have to become an adult, and we have to parent ourselves in the way that, maybe even our parent couldn't parent us, or our partner certainly can't parent us. It's really about stepping into our own, power, sovereignty, autonomy. That doesn't mean you have to do everything on your own. I'm not talking about fierce independence, just like I'm trying to support people in coming out of codependence. The middle path is interdependence, that you can be your own autonomous being and you can be in relationship with others in a healthy way, so that we're not codependent and we're not overly independent. Right? We're not anxiously attached, but we're also not avoidant. This is really about bringing people into their, if we talk about it from attachment form style, like security, But ultimately, my work is really focused on your authentic self. And that just means your true self. And that just means that you're really accepting of your entire being. And that you understand, recognize, feel, and embody that you're good enough and you're worthy and you're lovable and you're significant just as you are. That will always be the fundamentals, the groundwork, the foundation of why I'm doing this work and where I'm coming from. So let's go back to the first part, capacity. This was a really liberating just idea for me. And I'm going to tell you that you're not going to just get it overnight. This is really a practice. You are developing your own inner skills and your relationship to yourself at the same time. And to be honest, the more inner work that you do, the more able you are to recognize other people's capacity. Because if you're still stuck in your unconscious behavior, if you're still stuck in your triggers and they are ruling your life and the tail is wagging the dog, it's much harder to see beyond yourself, to be able to witness and observe somebody else without being, having the crap triggered out of you, without becoming defensive or attacking or reactive. So all of this work that I talk about in my podcast, or if you work with me personally one-on-one, it's all to bring us to this place where if you can take care of yourself, then you can start to begin to see life and others through a clearer lens. For those of you that have worked with me, you know that I'll say that beliefs, our perspectives are like colored, tinted lenses. That if you have a belief that's, say, red, you're going to see everything red. And until you do that work to release, resolve, and heal and alchemize that belief system, you're going to see through tinted colored lenses. And when you do that work, then you start to see things through clear lenses. And you can just see things for what they are. And they don't trigger you as much, and they don't affect you as much. And you can just you can put yourself in other people's shoes a lot more. You can empathize more. You can see the bigger picture more. You have periphery vision rather than tunnel vision. All of this is about expanding our awareness and our experience so that we can be in the isness of existence. And it's just a hell of a lot easier. It doesn't mean that life is easy. Like, yeah, we're going to have our hard moments. We're going to have our challenges. We're going to have our up and down days. But it does just become easier because we're just not being poked and prodded. Our wound isn't being poked and prodded every day. And then we're at the mercy of how shitty that makes us feel. You know what I mean? So when I came out of my marriage 4.5 years ago, I guess it's been now, maybe longer. It had been like 9.5 years, that we were together. We'd had a child. There was a lot that came out of it. And I really tried the last 4 years, of that partnership to work on these things. And when you come out of something like that, it's a great opportunity to reflect. And any relationship, I don't care if it's a month long, a year long, or 10 years long, every ending offers us the opportunity to be able to reflect and process and ultimately grow. It can be a huge growth spurt if you really take the bull by the horns and you face it and you don't avoid what's there. But one of the things I had, you go through the process of whatever, the process of grief is, and you're not just grieving that person, actually, more so you're grieving the idea of the life that you wanted, the person that you'd become, the family that you'd have. It's actually, for me personally, that's what I was grieving more, was what I wanted in my life, the vision of that. And so as I've grown older, I really understand the art of letting go of our expectations of what we thought life would look like or should look like, because life just, it unfolds in ways, and it all brings us to where, as long as you stay true to your heart and you walk a path of authenticity, like, you're never going to go off path, because there's always something to gain. There's always an opportunity. There's always something to learn. There's always something to grow through. And it brings you to the next level, so to speak. I know that's a bit of a funny term because I don't like to look at things hierarchically, but, evolution, you're spiraling forward. But you go through like the resentment and the regret and the, why did I do this? And why did I make that choice? And why didn't I leave sooner? All of these things. And I won't go too in depth into that story, but where capacity comes in is I was really frustrated with my ex-husband because it was like he was in a real state of denial. And so I really didn't feel seen or heard or understood. And those are three pretty fundamental needs that we have as humans. And when I got to, so I was really angry. I had so much anger for years. But when I got to the point of like, oh, he does not have the capacity. He does not have the capacity to be able to see, hear, understand me. Then it's like, it just it liberated me, because it's like, right, you can't force someone. It's like if you look at a baby that can't walk yet, you can't get angry at the fact that they can't walk yet because it's not within their physical capacity to walk yet, right? So the thing is that emotional stuff and mental stuff, it's a bit more ambiguous because we can't see it, right? And all humans have needs or certain expectations when they're not conscious. Those needs aren't conscious. That we want to have our emotional self and our, whatever, these different layers of ourselves, different aspects of ourselves. We want those needs met. And because we can't see like it's much easier with a physical thing. Like, okay, that person doesn't have the capacity to run because their leg is broken, right? That's super obvious, But when it's emotional or mental or spiritual, it feels more ambiguous because we can't see it. But it doesn't mean, some people, oh God, I have to be really careful of what words I use because we live in such a politically correct environment. So back in the day, you'd say something was a handicap, right? Whether that was physical or otherwise. So please, I don't want any kind of woke comments on like I shouldn't be using that, but I'm just going to be using that as terminology, right? There aren't just physical quote unquote handicaps. There's also emotional or psychological. And what I mean by that is that maybe there was some kind of trauma. And so someone just doesn't have the emotional capacity to be able to give or provide certain people with, their needs, or to even to empathize. And same thing psychologically, mentally, if people have experienced trauma or based on, what the dynamic was of their childhood or what happened throughout their lives, they might just not have the mental capacity. It's just like how even on a day, if you're really overwhelmed and stressed and on empty, you will not have the mental and emotional capacity to support someone on that day. You just won't. And it's really helpful to use this word in a relationship, because that can help that person not take it personal when you say, today I don't have the capacity to be present. I don't have the capacity to give you what you need today, because I don't have the energy myself. And just on a side note, that's why, self-giving, giving to yourself is the most generous thing that you can do for others, because if you're on full, the more you can give. If you're on empty, you can't give anything, right? So, okay, the handicap is probably a terrible word to use, but I'm just using that so that you can have the visual of, for some people, it literally is like they're in a wheelchair. Emotionally, mentally, for whatever reason, and again, when we can see things through a more clear lens and a neutral perspective, we can have a better understanding. We can even get to the point of maybe having compassion. And all of this is not to be patronizing. It's just to actually to step into our compassionate nature. And when we take things less personal, life just gets a lot easier, as I said, a lot less painful, right? So another example, and actually I use this tool a lot in my work. I find it really useful. Again, not to pigeonhole, but it's just a very useful tool. It's really good to understand what both your Enneagram type is and either your partner, your family members, the people that are in your direct life, because it just gives you, again, a greater understanding. You're not pigeonholing that person because everyone is still unique. And the Enneagram, there are 9 personality types, but even within that, there's 3 different subtypes and there's different wings. And it's a very complex system. So it's not to say you are that type and so therefore everyone that is that number is that type. It's nuanced. But it's really helped me because firstly, it's helped me to understand myself better, but it really helps me to understand the person that I'm with and where they might be coming from when they behave a certain way, or how they show up, how they deal with when they're triggered, when their personality type, like those are their weaknesses, those are their strengths. There is just a map, and it's really helpful. So for example, I had something come up with my mom a couple weeks ago. And my former self, when I was younger, before I've done all this work and have an understanding of myself and my Enneagram type and her Enneagram type and, my triggers and my needs and all of these things, I would have really been triggered, and I would have really been hurt, and I would have really been upset or disappointed and all of that stuff. And I recognized a pattern in her, and I knew it wasn't coming from any kind of bad intention. I knew that she was actually coming from a really supportive place, believing in me, but it was a certain habit that she has in the way she communicates about something. And I don't like it. I don't like it because it takes away from what she's actually trying to give me. And so I communicated it with her. And again, my former self probably would have been hurt and maybe would have either attacked or defended. And I would have just been in the story of that and not the greater, broader peripheral view perspective of what was going on. So where I am now, understanding her Enneagram type, understanding my own needs and understanding capacity really helped me in this situation, because when I give feedback on something that I knew would trigger her response is she withdraws. That's her Enneagram type. She withdraws. She doesn't like conflict, and she has to sit with it. And the thing is, she said, I don't know how long. It might be days. It might be longer than that. In my mind, I've kind of said, you know what? We probably won't ever talk about it, because I know that for her, there's a capacity, there's that emotionality. I grew up feeling I always felt loved by her. I always felt loved by my mom. Did I feel like she could handle my emotions? Did I feel like she could be there for my emotions? No. That's the truth, because I know she doesn't have the capacity. And not fully, like in some ways, yes. In some ways I do feel emotionally supported by her, but I'm a personality type that has much larger emotions. I don't have a problem expressing or communicating my emotions. I don't have a problem going into the deepest, darkest depths of my emotional being. That's what I think allows me to do this work, is because I can kind of hold anything and everything and nothing is too much for me. But she's not that kind of personality type, and that's okay. That's okay. I have an understanding of why. But I could go into the story if I took it personal. So here's where capacity leads to personal, leads to story. So if I took it personal, I was observing of going like, wow, if I look at my life, have I had a parental figure, or have I had people in my life other than my closest girlfriends that I feel like can emotionally support me? Let's go back to capacity. My father, no capacity on any level whatsoever. He was a narcissist. He was terribly abused himself. So I remember being 2.5, 3 years old once my parents had separated, and I was alone with him when I would, go to his house for the weekend or whatever. And he was so non-existent with his presence. His capacity was so non-existent that I remember like sitting there in a room by myself or being left in the car by myself thinking, isn't he meant to be the adult here? This is like my 3-year-old self, right? So I understood he had zero capacity. And then after this incident with my mom a couple of weeks ago, I was like, wow, I'd always thought like my father didn't have the capacity and I couldn't get my needs met by him. But in what areas did I feel like I couldn't get my needs met by my mom? And let me preface, I'm not saying this with any kind of judgment. No parent can offer 100% of a child's needs. It's impossible. We're all human. We're all trying our best. And that needs to be okay. That needs to be good enough. Like, I love and adore my mom. I have no anger or resentment towards her whatsoever, but I can see the areas in which, there just wasn't the capacity. So do I feel like my deeper emotional self was really supported? In many ways, I felt like I had to do it for myself. I really had to take care of my deeper emotions by myself. I didn't have a father to do that, and I didn't have a mother that I felt could fully do that for myself. She loved and cared for me in other ways, and for that I'm so grateful. But for this one aspect, no, because she went into avoidance, or she numbed, or she withdrew. And again, that's her capacity, and because of her own story, and what, that's okay. I'm at peace with that. Had I taken it personal, had I not understood her capacity, had I taken it personal, I could have gone into the story of, I will never have my emotional needs met. Nobody will understand my emotional needs. I'm alone. I could go into victimhood. I could go into victimization. Right? And that story could spin me out and spin me down and make me feel alone and make me feel depressed and make me feel like I will never have my needs met. And right? And that's kind of going back to the archetypal child that is constantly looking for someone to make it better for us and to fulfill all of our needs and to make, just to put things right for us. And at some point, the reason why we do this work is because at some point we have to become an adult and we have to parent ourselves the way that we wish our parents could have parented us. But that's even not the point, because we could have had the most amazing parents, the most loving, compassionate, present parent ever. And even still, not all of our needs would have been met. And even still, we'd have to come to a point where we grow up, because that is part of this process of being human. That's part of this human arc, is that this is part of becoming our own autonomous, sovereign, self-empowered beings. And that's a beautiful thing. And we should want to grow into that, because it's liberating, it's empowering, it's beautiful. And I never had the fear of becoming an adult. If anything, I was like, I can't wait to become an adult. I'm Capricorn. I don't know. I think we grow up fast, old soul, whatever. So I was kind of happy when I got into my 30s. But there's so many people that are out there living like having kind of Peter Pan syndrome, where they don't want to grow up because, society's version of adulting fucking sucks, right? You work at a job that you hate, you pay the bills, you've got to do all this crap, this responsibility. Our society is fundamentally effed up. That is my perspective. Humanity, I don't think is. I think what we actually, who we innately are and what we want to create joy. We want to create inspiration and creativity and collaboration and community and compassion. I really believe these are our innate, that's our innate being and desire. I think the structure of our society and the people that have created that, let's just say their capacity, let's not even get into that, but it's not healthy. That's not healthy, but that shouldn't define humanity. That should define the groups of people that have created that structure, right? They need a hell of a lot more love in their hearts, then the world would change. But I digress. Where was I? Adulting. So in that structure of society, being an adult nobody wants to be that, right? But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about really maturing and coming into ourselves and just growing up. That's the kind of adult that I'm talking about, where you love yourself and you can take care of yourself and you can be there for yourself, and why we do this work, basically. Because if we're coming from the child, and I want to, on a side note, I want to talk about attachment and being a child, because when we're a child, we don't have the mental capacity yet, right? We haven't flexed that part, that hasn't developed in us to be able to observe beyond ourselves. Children are very intuitive. They feel things very, very strongly. They absorb, but they still are in the sphere of it's about them. The world revolves around them. And so they take everything deeply, we as children take everything deeply personal. And this is why it's really important as we get older to kind of unpack the story that we made, because a lot of the time, most of the time, the story is false. It's just how we try to make sense of things, right? Oh, my mother wasn't present, and so therefore that means I'm not lovable. I wasn't good enough. No, maybe she wasn't present because she had to work 2 jobs. You know what I mean? Like we don't know. You have to look always at what is the greater context. But children take things deeply personal, but also when we're children, talking about attachment style. I was listening to a snippet of Teal Swan talking about this, and I couldn't agree with her more. There has been a terrible false education that, if your baby cries, oh, don't give them too much because then they'll become really needy. If they cry, put them in their crib and let them cry by themselves. If they cry in the middle of the night, and ignore them because they're going to be too needy. If you give them too much, no. What Teal Swan was saying is that the more a child feels attached, healthily attached to their parent, the more love you give, the more presence you give. This isn't about mollycoddling, but this is just being present, skin to skin, love, compassion, being there. The more they can be free and go off and be independent. If you withhold those things, the more anxious they will become, the more needy they will become. So it's kind of like it's the opposite of how they've taught us, right? If you give them too much attention, they will be needy. No, if you don't give them enough attention, they will be needy. And so what she was saying with adults, if you're dealing with someone that's anxiously attached, normally what happens is people go, oh God, and they become avoidant. They push away because it's too much, right? It's really needy. But she's like, actually, if you come towards them and you go, okay, I'm here. What is it? Then they're like, oh, you're not abandoning me. You're not rejecting me. You're not pushing me away. I'm not alone. Then they can relax. And I've talked about this several times before. I could boil things down to, are we in a state of tension or are we in a state of relaxation? When we're relaxed, we can let go of things. Then we become less needy because we feel safe and secure. So what I was saying earlier is this is about not being anxiously attached or avoidant, but really coming into our own security. But people are anxiously attached if they haven't had that sense of security as a child. So I'm just throwing this in because it's really important to also understand this, that if you're in a relationship with someone that's either avoidant or anxiously attached, it's because they're scared. And so we need to create a sense of safety. I know this is a big tangent, but it comes into this understanding of capacity. What is someone's capacity and their attachment to relationship, or their relationship to relationship, I did a podcast on that one, is really important, because a lot of this comes down to fear. What are we afraid of? If we're afraid of certain things, our capacity is going to be more limited. If we feel safe within ourselves, and if we feel safe first and foremost within ourselves, then we can feel safe in like the concentric circles expand outwards, right? Because safety, comfort, confidence within myself is going to allow me to feel safe, comfortable, confident within my relationships, my friendships, my work, my life. You see what I mean? It keeps on going out. But it has to start with me as the seed, you as the seed, within us as the seed. As within, so without. So yeah, I'm just dropping that in as a side note, but it's really important. And then that's also important. That's a big reason why it's important for us to grow up and become the adult, because we can't live forever in that child state or that victimized state that's looking for a partner to fulfill all of our needs. And then we take it dreadfully personal when they don't. And then we get into that whole story that brings us into why we either don't feel good enough, lovable enough, significant enough, worthy enough, or why we feel afraid of being rejected or abandoned. And then this is what plays out in our relationships again and again and again. And it's imprisoning. So, I feel like I'm here to support people to liberate you from your own unnecessary suffering and to help you heal the parts of you that hurt, that are tender, that are wounded. And that's okay. That's normal. We all have it. And that scar can turn into a work of art that shows you who you are and who you've become, the journey that you've had and the journey that you will continue to have. It won't go away. It will be a scar, but that's okay. That can be a thing of beauty. But as I've said in the past, you don't want that wound to keep on oozing blood. You don't want it to be an open wound. So if you do that work and you heal and you transform and you really step into your self-worth, which doesn't mean you become perfect. It just means that you accept all of who you are. And therefore, through accepting all of who you are, you innately love yourself, because self-love is just there. It's been there. It's just waiting for you to come back home and to sit with it, like it will bring you into its arms so readily, so availably, So just to kind of recap, once you do the inner work, and that's not like that's an ongoing project, right? I don't know. Project is a terrible word. That's an ongoing relationship journey, experience with yourself. But the more that we do the work, then we can step into a more neutral state of being where we can look at things more objectively. And the understanding the capacity, it doesn't mean you let people off the hook for bad behavior. That's not what I'm talking about. If someone is showing up manipulatively, abusively, in a mean way, whatever, part of doing this work and adulting ourselves is that then we can say the child couldn't speak up for itself, but the adult can. And if we can show up in a way where we can speak for ourselves in a calm way, in a clear way, in a direct way, then, that's also, I could do a whole other podcast on boundaries, which is really just an act of self-love. It's not defensiveness. But absolutely, there's a place for that, right? When you need to stand up for yourself and go, no, that's not okay. I will not be treated that way. And I will not condone that behavior. And at the same time, you can understand that where that behavior might be coming from. It's because their unconscious behavior, their triggers, their wounds, their incapacity. But I'm not saying you condone bad behavior. But bad behavior aside, when you can understand someone's capacity, it just, you can let go of taking it personal, that it's a personal insult to you and that it means something about you and your self-worth. So then the story has no legs. Right? The story needs to have a limiting belief about yourself. The story needs to have a kind of victimization for it to play out. If you remove all of that stuff and therefore you remove the taking it personal, that person is doing this to you to hurt you, right? Or to prove to you that you're not good enough, or because, you're not worthy of having your needs met. If you take that whole structure out, it's like pulling the card from the house of cards, and the rest of it collapses and you can't have a story anymore. And when you don't have a story anymore, that's when you're liberated. That's when you're free as a human being. And so then when challenges do arise, which they will, you'll feel sad or you'll feel angry or you'll feel some kind of challenging emotion, but then you'll just be able to be with the emotion. Which is like that. Sometimes that's hard enough as it is. The story always creates what I call unnecessary suffering. That's the kind of suffering that we're just like caking on like frost on a cake. And it's just like, well, maybe that's yummy for some people, but I'm saying it's like, right, you're adding on something that just doesn't need to be there. It's not part of the fundamental, experience that you're having. So ultimately, this is all about liberation, and letting go of the story will liberate you from unnecessary suffering. And then you can just be with the experience, be with the emotion. It might be painful, it might be uncomfortable, But you'll be with it, with love, with patience, with kindness, with compassion, and then you'll move through it. And that's being human, day in, day out, right? But the story is what keeps us small. The story is what keeps us victimized. The story is what keeps us in blame and resentment and arguments and betrayal and all of this stuff. And, my mother did this and my father didn't do that. And my boyfriend or my husband or my wife or my girlfriend or my friend. Do you see what I mean? We can just eliminate drama because we don't have to get caught in that crap anymore. We can just be with what is. And then the next beautiful, skillful step is to be compassionate for all of us. And I don't know about you, but when I look at this world, I think it needs a hell of a lot more compassion. And I think as events unfold in these coming years, we're really being asked to drop into our hearts more and more and more. I've seen it for years. This is really how we evolve as a humanity, as individuals and as a collective. We have to drop into heart. And I feel like our hearts are opening. For some, that's because you've done the inner work. For some, it's because you're with someone that's done the inner work, and so they're inspiring you to drop into that space. For some, unfortunately, it's going to be through tragedy. But it's like we all need to just, I really feel like this is the greater path, is opening your heart. And, for some that can happen through peace, and for some your heart's going to be shattered open. But the silver lining is that the more open our heart is, the stronger we become, the more beautiful we become. The more beautiful our lives become, the more beautiful this world will become. And so the reason why I'm tying this in is because we're in a time where it's not just about the individual anymore. It cannot be. It's whatever you do. It's like the butterfly that flaps its wings and it's felt across the universe. We're very much in that place right now. The work that you do on yourself has a massive positive ripple effect on us as a collective, like one species, right? We're one organism. You could say that we are the cells of one organism. So don't underestimate the work that you're doing on yourself, that it will have a profound effect on your well-being and your happiness and your joy and your peace in this lifetime. But it will affect everyone that is around you, and it will affect the greater whole. And you could even say it will affect the entire damn universe. That's pretty freaking cool. So, yeah. I will always bring it back to heart, because that's really at the center of everything. And if you can drop into your heart, then these things like capacity and not taking things personal and letting go of your story also become easier, because when you drop into your heart, that's where we soften. That's where we drop into our true innate nature, which is loving and kind and compassionate. And we want to support and we want to collaborate and we want to be in peace. So I hope that's been helpful. As always, take it or leave it as feels right for you, and anything that triggers you, let it be a point of contemplation. And yeah, good luck with it all. I hope that these podcasts are supportive in some shape or form, or at least thought-provoking. Anyway, I will leave it at that. And as always, loving you from afar. You've been listening to Raw Conversations with Corinne Bloom. Thanks so much for showing up, listening in, and being a part of the conversation with me.